On this week's episode of Film Rhapsody, I sat Russell down with his mentor Karel Segers for a one-on-one chat about writing, storytelling, and everything in between. After years working as a story consultant, Karel has toured and lectured around the world, founding Immersion Screenwriting and spearheading the Accelerator Pod that brought Russell and I together. He has played a pivotal role in helping writers take their writing to the next level, and just this year he played an important part in bringing the feature Danger Close to the cinemas.
Welcome to the show, Karel.
Hello, Russell.
Well, thank you for taking the time to come in here. I guess where we should start is you telling everyone else a little about who you are.
Well, it all started a long time ago in Belgium. That's where I was born. I wrote my first produced script when I was at high school. No, not high school, primary school.
Really?
I was like 17, I think it was 16 or 17 years old.
Wow.
And there was a TV show for youth, and it was a bit rebellious, and it was my absolute favorite show. And they invited viewers to send in scripts, and I sent in a whole batch, literally 20 ideas. It was a comedy show, and I got a letter back, and I was like over the moon. Like there was national television. I got a letter with the logo, which was the listening ears, the old Belgian radio and television thing, and they filmed it, and I got the afternoon off, and my brother and sister were in it as well. And you can watch it on YouTube if you can spell De Winkeldetective.
Sure.
Then you'll find the clip. It's about like a 2-3 minute.
Was that your first paid gig? Was it paid
gig?
Yeah.
I got paid. I could choose between either a Casio mini synthesizer or 4,000 Belgian francs, and I knew where my career was heading, so I opted for the money.
You can buy mini Casio recorders, I imagine.
Exactly.
Although
And I was, to be honest, I was into synthesizers, and at the time, I aimed slightly higher than the Casio. And I was into Korg and Oberheim and that sort of stuff.
Oh, definitely, the good brands. Yeah.
Did
that lead to more stuff with them, or was that just sort of a one-off?
Not really. It was a one-off. I have this thing. I got to get things out of my system. And so at some point, I wanted to do a movie score, a soundtrack. In 1995, I gave myself 10 years to do it, and I did it in 2005.
Oh, fantastic.
So I do that sort of stuff.
What movie was that for?
That was for a feature called Puppy. Here in Australia, a Melbourne-based writer-director called Kieran Galvin, and that became the first ever Australian film to be released on Blu-ray.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
that's awesome. So from then on, you went to work both in radio and TV behind the scenes and on the air. So can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, I had always been enamored with radio. I was totally obsessed. I knew everything about radio, and I did some, holiday work for the local radio station, and it was 1988. I got into the national radio, and at some point I was the youngest producer. I don't know whether it was 88 or a few years later, but anyway, then I moved to Brussels Production Center, and I basically did everything you can imagine about radio. From journalism to music selection to production, presenting. I did a radio documentary at some point. You name it. I've done it all, and I loved it. But at some point, there's this moment. I was giving directions to someone as I was producing a show, and I had these shivers going down my spine. I realized that I was giving directions to my childhood idol. Ooh. And that was kind of wrong. It didn't feel right. I said that was a time for me to get out of it, because I'd done everything and achieved what I could achieve, had a great time, got out of radio just in time, because after that, it changed completely. It became a marketing-driven business, and that's when I went into TV for a short while. Film Net, which was pay TV, and I was involved in selecting, acquiring, and programming independent films. Did that for a few years in Belgium, Holland, and then later in London, and I came to Australia in 2001.
Did you have any training before that, or was it something you found yourself falling into and then learning on the job?
Well, I did something called Germanic philology. It's a linguistics and literature university degree. And it turned out that most people who were working in radio and television had that degree. So, so I needed that. Never really used it. Because
that's sort of the area of Europe that it's all Germanic based in languages, isn't it?
Yeah, well, Germanic languages are English, German, Dutch, and Indo-Germanic languages are Swedish and Norwegian.
So does that give you like a better understanding of those languages because you have that sort of education?
I wouldn't say so. I wouldn't say living in Europe helps.
Yeah.
But actually, I just realized that I made a mistake. I said that I mentioned Finnish in that group, and if any linguist is listening, they would go like, "No, that's not true."
They'll lynch you.
Because Finnish is not part of the same group. They're in together with Hungarian. They have this mini group of totally impenetrable, very difficult languages.
Is Finland or Hungary the? I vaguely remember hearing something about how one country has something like 100 different dialects.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
I can count to 3 in Finnish. Do you want me to do that?
Go for it.
Uksi, kaksi, kolme.
It's awesome. I can say some things in Greek, but nothing that we can air. Always learn to swear.
I can say something in ancient Greek.
Go for it.
You've got a European here, so I think you got to milk me for languages now, right?
Please teach me the swears.
All right, ancient Greek. Here we go. Uta kremata alata temata istibe bayak temata.
Right.
And it's true too.
And that's all compliments?
Absolutely.
Okay, so from then on, you started consulting and storytelling. Was that something you fell into or something you sought out?
Well, I wanted to produce. I came to Australia, wanted to be creative in film, actually wanted to set up a production company. I did so. Aussie Films still exists. But I learned the hard way that Australia is not really the most producer-friendly place on the planet.
Yeah.
And so that didn't last very long. And I mean, more recently, I actually realized that situation is even far worse than I thought at the time. But at the same time, I was trying to avoid following all my family and relatives who were teachers. Yeah. And my grandfather was a teacher. Both my grandfathers were teachers. My mother was a teacher, and I got like a whole bunch of aunties who were teachers. So
you ended up taking sort of a roundabout way
exactly. At some point, I realized that instead of telling writers who wanted to get their stuff produced, I was telling them, how I believed their scripts could be better. I kept repeating that to more and more people, and at some point, it just made a lot of sense to get them all into one room. Yeah. Before I knew, I was actually lecturing.
So how did you basically learn those skills? Is that something that you just sort of acquired out of experience?
Well, when I was acquiring films, I was watching I went to these film markets and film festivals, and I'd watched like 50, 55 films in a week. And that's when you start seeing patterns. Mm-hmm. Around the same time, I started devouring the most common screenwriting books, Robert McKee, John Truby, Michael Haig, Christopher Vogler. Not sure if Blake Snyder was around at the time, but Linda Seeger surely was. So I read all those books and basically distilled what I thought made sense, because I have a little bit of an academic mind. I always ask why. Yeah. And I mean, these days I'm usually very frustrated when I read screenwriting books, because either they're just rehashing the same thing or they're just plain lying. Right. There's one, and I won't mention which it is, recently started reading. It's quite a popular book, and it's just hogwash. It's just such totally useless useless stuff. So so I kind of tried to reinvent the wheel, which was not always the most effective or at least profitable way to go about it. But I'm kind of proud to say that I found a few new angles that I think are useful for screenwriters. And I mean, you're probably aware of what I'm talking about. Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. Like point of view, midpoint reversal. Yeah. That sort of thing. Talking about events, actions, and characters in that respect.
Did you ever try to? I know you have some literature out there. Did you ever try to like join those books and sort of corner the market on this is the right way to do it?
I on average, twice every month, people ask me, "Where's my book?" and I should write my book. And I've started putting it together structurally, but I don't know whether it ever be there. We'll see, because it's gargantuan undertaking to write a good book. And I said when, I didn't say if. When I write that book, it'll be a good book, and it'll take a lot of time. So I have.
Would you maybe write versions for like, this is how to write a drama, this is a comedy genre, like different angles on how to do it?
Possibly. There are differences, but I'm not an expert in each of these genres. So although I may put footnotes per genre, I don't think I'm going to go into detail for each.
Righto.
Yeah.
I guess one thing I want to find out is like I feel like I've always been a writer. It just took me as long as it took to get where I am now. I guess the question would be, can writing be learned, or is it something you need to be born with?
Yeah, that's a question always, often comes back. I think everybody is a writer to some degree. Some people have to work harder than others. And I think you kind of know whether you're a writer or not. I think if you have that unquenchable desire to get a story out, I guess then you're a writer.
That nagging little voice in the back of your head.
Exactly. Yeah. But not everybody has, this is born with the skills. And I think that there are skills that you can learn. I'm absolutely sure of that. And if you listen to some of the greatest contemporary screenwriters, they will admit that. If you listen to an Aaron Sorkin, he learned what he knows from listening to plays. He listened to more than 1,000 plays. And it's just, it's osmosis. I mean, you're familiar with that screenwriting course I've got online. It's called Immersion. It works by osmosis. I really believe that the core skills you need to execute the script on the page, you can learn.
Yeah.
So if you feel the inspiration and the desire, that's one thing, but you still need to learn the skills.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's going to be a very, very long journey of rewrites, I think.
When you relocated to Australia in the early 2000s and started Aussiewood and started working both in consulting and producing some stuff, did that leave much time for your own writing?
Well, I've never really written much, and I think that's the teacher DNA inside me. I started a second screenplay when I was doing my military service in 1989, and I wrote 63 pages, and I gave it to my best friend, who was my mentor for a long time. He's one of the smartest minds on the planet. His name is Chris Krapps. That's his real name, and he, by the way, he wrote a fantastic book, Secrets of the Cinema. Unfortunately, it's in Dutch, but it'll be translated, I'm sure. And so I gave it to him, and he was honest. He was the type of friend you need. He said, "It's absolute crap.
Yeah.
This is not a story. You need to start from scratch." And it was a great example of starting a screenplay not knowing where you're going.
Yeah.
And I heard, in fact, after this interview, I'll be working with some students in Sweden, and I just I read one of their outlines, and the student said how he got writer's block after 50 pages. It was the exact same case.
Yeah.
Very inspired to get something out, but not thinking about the structure and where you're going beforehand.
I can totally relate to that, yeah.
Yeah, that was me in 1989. Yeah. So what I want to say is that I co-write.
Yeah.
I don't write alone. I co-write because I don't have all the skills it takes. I don't think so. But I work very well in a team.
Yeah.
And with the team of the Story Shop, we wrote Danger Close, and we're writing on other projects now. And that's just a dream. I mean, we achieve so much together that none of us would have ever achieved in isolation.
Yeah. You bring up Danger Close, and that's doing very well now. It's very high regarded. The story is about the Long Tan.
Yeah, the Battle of Long Tan in August 1966 was the battle in which more Australians died than any other single battle.
And that's the Korean War?
This is Vietnam.
Oh, it is Vietnam.
Yeah,
right.
Long Tan's Vietnam.
Yep.
And it's a story that bizarrely had never been brought to the screen.
Really?
And some people had tried to write the scripts for it. Some people with very, you know, how would I say, ringing names in this country, you know, people that were known all the way into Hollywood, and none of these managed to break the story, to crack the story for the screen. And then the producer, Martin Walsh, came to me and he asked if I could do it. I said, well, I can't do it. I can have a look at what you've got now, if you can give me a synopsis and I can give you advice. He didn't have a synopsis. That was the first red flag.
Wow.
But he wrote one overnight. I read a synopsis and said, well, listen, you've got to start from scratch. And I can, you know, find writers for you, or we can do it with the story shop. And we pitched what we believed could be a workable angle. And he accepted that. And that was 2011, and we started working on it pretty much straight away.
Wow. You mentioned your service in the military beforehand. Did that help in cracking a story about like a military campaign?
That's a good question. I've actually never thought about that. I was in the military for a year, but I worked as a journalist. I only had like 1 month of serious training.
Yep.
And I think it helps to understand what the military is. You know, I was there and I got serious training. You know, I got proper weapons training. We had to go out, you know, slept, you know, overnight, you know, in a hole in the ground, and it was not pleasant. So, you know, you get like a taste of how that all works. So maybe intuitively it contributed, but it's interesting you asked that question. I never thought about it. It might have, yeah.
That's good. Going back to when you first came out here and you started the story department, did that grow out of your work as a consultant and a writer?
Yes, absolutely. Initially, I had Aussie Films, that was a production company, but then I was reinventing myself and I needed a new brand. And because I wanted to focus on story more than script. I think in Australia there was this overemphasis on script, on dialogue, on execution. And I think we needed to go back to story, and that's why I call it a story department. There is a story department, which is a small coverage service in LA, but I didn't know at the time.
Right. Okay. And did that cause any problems?
No.
Didn't have to change
Not at all. No.
Didn't care?
No.
All right. Well, Dan and I have talked a lot about the Accelerator Pod. It's how we met back in 2015. For someone who knows nothing about the Accelerator Pod, how would you describe it to them?
It's something that's hard to describe because there's nothing like it anywhere else. It consists, this is what it looks like. It's 4 weekends. These weekends are spaced out with about a month or 2 in between each. In the first weekend, you're going to brainstorm and you're going to do a very rough pitch. Then the second, then you're going to workshop on the feedback after you get feedback to that pitch. That's the first weekend. And then the second weekend, you're going to refine that pitch and you're going to pitch to the industry. It'll still be rough, and that's okay. Then you get the opportunity to listen, to get feedback from the industry, and then you can rework and workshop with that feedback, with industry feedback. And then the second half of the pod, we're going to focus more on the pitching part. In the first 2 weekends, we focus on the concept and what sort of story you've got to tell. We brainstorm, because the idea is also to realize that you should have more than one idea. A lot of writers work for way too long on just one concept, one idea. Yeah. And here we brainstorm several ideas. So the second half of the pod, weekend 3 and 4, is going to be geared more towards pitching. So we do proper pitching training in weekend 3, and in the meantime the concepts keep being refined, and in the final weekend you have your what we call the final template, in which you have your setup of your character, you have your setting, your theme, you can pitch the plot in a few sentences, and then in the final weekend the industry comes back and now you're going to do your proper industry pitch.
Well, this is the third Accelerator movie pod. Am I correct?
We're doing the second television pod. We've had 3 feature pods, that's right. And this is our second TV pod. It's the 5th pod that I'm participating in.
How has it changed over the years?
I think we've kind of locked into place the core processes. You remember the first one. You were there.
Yeah.
It was chaotic. and it was a lot of fun. And guess what? It worked. You
Yeah.
know, there were a few great projects that came out of it. Reunion was one of them, and but funnily enough, because it was so chaotic, and we were responding very quickly to how the participants experienced it. It didn't feel very professional to me, and then we started tinkering, and then only to realize that some things were actually so good we shouldn't have changed them.
Yep.
So we locked in a certain way of workshopping where you're workshopping with a group. We locked in the overall structure of the pod. And now this year we brought back that insanity, the mania of that early weekend in the first pod, where things went very quick.
Yeah.
You know, you had to brainstorm very quickly, you had to pitch very quickly, and that worked a treat. And we've done it again. We did it earlier this month, and this is really the right way of approaching this. So we brought that back. So I think we've refined it over the years. The workshopping itself, we've got a very tight structure for that, and then the bigger picture of the pod has also been locked into place.
That's good. You mentioned the projects that came out of the pod. I remember seeing recently the one project that has gone on to being a feature film and has been released in Australia, that being turned into kinos, The Furies. Yeah. What was your role on the feature?
Well, you know, I was there in the room when Tony pitched it for the first time. So in those first pods, I actually gave feedback right, you know, immediately. It was instant feedback. So I was involved in that. Then once Tony's project was selected amongst a few others, I was involved in the reading of every document, you know, every outline, every synopsis. And then when Tony started punching out scripts, I was also the first to read the script. And then I would work with Tony up to the point where we both believed it was ready to be shown to the sales agent who was attached, and the production company. And then I read about 16 drafts, I think.
Yeah, we all do a lot of drafts. Yeah. I remember from the pod you being a very big proponent of loglines. How would you describe loglines and how important they are to everyone?
A logline is a one-sentence summary of your story, and the reason they're important is if you can give someone your story in one sentence, it means you understand what your story is about. Because a lot of writers, particularly, you know, emerging writers, don't really see or understand the structure of stories for the screen. That it's very particular, and if you understand that, you can convert that big picture idea into that sentence. And I think that's why it's important. And I've devised a particular formula for the logline. Different people have different sorts of loglines. They're all kind of sound similar, but I find three elements very important. Obviously character, action, but I also focus on the event, which is the catalyst or the inciting incident. And I really want that in that logline, so I understand where the story kicks off. Sometimes you can use it in your pitch. You don't have to. It's the smallest version of your story that at the same time already gives us an idea of what sort of structure is going to play out.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah. Is there any loglines that stick with you that you can think of right now?
There's one logline that I struggled with initially. Students asked me, what's the logline for Inception? I couldn't give it. And then at some point, one of my students gave me the perfect logline.
Right.
And so I've actually built on top of that, and that's now probably the most complex logline that I can give you off the top of my head. It would be a challenge, but shall I give it a go?
Go for it.
When a dream security expert is given the chance to see his children again, he must overcome the guilt over the death of his wife before he can plant an idea in the mind of the son of a dying business mogul.
Wow, that is a mouthful, isn't it?
That's probably more than the prescribed 25 words, but I over the years I've become a little bit more lenient. As long as it is a sentence that makes sense and it has that structure, I don't think it's an issue when they kind of flow over that 25-word limit.
Yeah. Does he overcome the guilt in the movie?
Good question.
Yeah, because it works for a long line, but it's like, is it actually how it is?
I think he does.
Yeah.
At the end of Act 2.
Well, with Loglines, you've got the Logline website. Did that grow out of you, your consultancy and your teaching, and just the idea of just perfecting the logline for writers?
It's actually this is a funny thing. At the time, I had a very bizarre obsession. What does a guy do late at night when he's sitting at his computer and nobody's watching? I was looking at beautiful WordPress themes. Now, WordPress is software for blogging, and so I had a bit of an obsession with WordPress themes. And at some point, I saw a WordPress theme that was for Q&A. Like Q&As, websites.
Yep.
And it was such a beautiful theme, I bought it. I had absolutely no use for it. But at the same time, I also had a bit of an obsession with registering domain names.
Yeah.
And at some point, I registered a domain name, logline.it.
Yep.
Because I was dealing with loglines. And one day, I woke up and I put two and two together. It's like, hang on, I can use that WordPress theme with this domain and have people post loglines for feedback. So instead of asking a question, they just post their logline and then people give feedback. And that's the answer.
So without the theme, the website wouldn't have.
That's right. Exactly. Absolutely. And I set up that website in the course of maybe 3 hours. I did it all by myself. And within the year, I think it had like 1,000 loglines posted. And 5,000 reviews or something. We now have over 26,000 reviews and over 6,000 loglines.
And that's helped a lot of writers get to the next step?
Well, I hope so. I hope so. It's being used by students, by writers. I get emails every now and then, people who love it and say that it's helpful to them. So yeah, I'm happy.
Oh, that's great. With your work with other writers getting their scripts to the next level, can you describe that process? Is it unique to every single writer?
It is. It's very hard to kind of boil it down to a single process. Usually I try to go back to the concept. So I try to help the writer building that logline and see what's the core story. And then I try to go to a one-pager. And from the one-pager we go into further detail. But as you may expect, most writers have a screenplay when they come to me.
Yeah.
So they want me to read the script. Now, reading a screenplay takes a lot of time. And I live in Sydney. It's an expensive city. So it costs a lot of money to have me read a screenplay and spend the time on it that it takes to give good feedback. So and I don't think it's always the best investment for beginning writers to do that. So I basically recommend to already go back. I recommend that they write this one-pager from the existing screenplay. And then I give feedback to the one-pager. That can be done way, way more cheaply. And then we build from there. And then hopefully by the time they are ready to rewrite the screenplay, they've actually accepted that, because very often people think that they just need to do a quick brush up, a quick polish, whereas most of the time it's what we call a page one rewrite, a complete rewrite of the screenplay.
I imagine in some cases a lot of writers come to you thinking, okay, the screenplay I've written is pretty much perfect.
Yeah.
And you're going to pat me on the back and be like, good job.
Yeah. And
here's your ticket to Hollywood.
And usually they prepare you. They usually, there's this warning in the subtext of what they say. So they say, I was wondering if you could read my script. I'm pretty happy with it. Yeah. But you want to see if there's anything, that I could improve. But when somebody says I'm pretty happy with it, that's kind of like a warning. I will not rewrite the screenplay. I will not do a page one rewrite.
Has screen story telling changed a lot in the last decade?
It has, yeah, absolutely. I think television has had a massive impact on features, which used to be the other way around. I think we have more flexible point of view. We have characters that are not always redeemable. We now have characters who are not aspirational. You don't want to be like that character. Think Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler is fantastic screenplay. It's not your typical
There's
hero.
really no sympathy for that
No,
character, is there?
no.
Yeah.
And I think that's a sign of the times.
Mm.
And I think that comes from television. I think we've seen that sort of anti-heroes on the small screen before they came en masse to the big screen.
Mm. Has the rise of the cinematic universe has changed it even more?
It's something that's kind of happening outside my realm.
Yeah.
I think we've got to be realistic. There's this amazing keynote speech that Mark Duplass did for the South by Southwest convention, and he was basically saying that as writers and filmmakers, we shouldn't be deluded. He said the cavalry is not going to come. The chances that we are going to be working in Hollywood on that sort of level budget films is infinitesimal. It's it's not going to happen. Obviously, there are examples. There is James Wan who did Aquaman, and there's Taika Waititi who did Thor, but that's it. I don't know anyone else from Australia and New Zealand that raised to that sort of level. So I'm focusing on what I believe is achievable. And once you get there, I mean, you'll make the next leap.
Yeah.
I don't think, when you speak about cinematic universe, that's studio speak, that's Marvel, DC, that's, horror franchises.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we can learn from those because people start to think epically and in those terms. But I do warn people now at the pod, I would not go to a producer and say, listen, I've got a 10-season TV show, in the Star Wars universe. I don't think so.
We all have Star Wars TV shows we want to make.
I want to watch them first.
They're not too bad.
I hear.
Can we assume from the influence that TV has had on films, I guess that's kind of where the mentality of the cinematic universe has grown from, that this interconnecting storyline that just goes on and gets bigger and bigger as it goes on. Do you think that's something that we're going to continue to see? Or we'll get to a point where we're just like, okay, Marvel, DC, the Conjuring franchise, yeah? So Marvel, DC, the Conjuring franchise, are they going to become, you think, more the exceptions to the rule, or sort of the tentpole that everyone's going to aspire to?
That's a really good question. I think everything will forever change.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is how it works on that level now. I don't think we need to worry about it too much. We're in a very, the industry is in a state of flux. I mean, I've just returned from AFM, and I was shocked to see how quiet it was there.
Really?
That's supposed to be the biggest independent film market in the world. It was a bit scary. 2 streaming services have launched over the past 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like in the history of mankind, it never happened, right? And it's pretty massive ones, right? Apple TV Plus and Disney Plus. So that has a significant impact on our industry, and there's nothing you can do about that. But these waters are going to calm at some point, and I believe that there's one constant, and the constant is good story.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people say, don't worry, just write a good story. And then I get a bit nervous when people say, well, what is a good story? So I think if you make the effort to ask that question, what is common to all great story, then you're safe.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter what's happening out there. I mean, games have taken over from, there's way more money now going into games than into film. Who would have thought?
Yeah.
Games become more narratively driven, but still the core essence of story is still the same.
Mm-hmm.
I'm now finally playing the last 10% of Red Dead Redemption,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm having so much fun. Why is it? Because it's a great story. With a recognizable character in a recognizable universe, with clear tasks, clear events, and clear actions.
Yep.
Is that the sign that we have to?
No, that's
wrap up here?
the sign that I don't know how to turn my phone off.
You see, my phone is off by default.
Yes.
I'm a happy person.
You're a professional. Going back to what you mentioned about James Wan, Taika Waititi, is it possible for a writer to make a living in Australia now? Or has it become such a even more difficult thing to break into it?
You know, the answer is the thematic question of a lot of films. What are you prepared to do? You know, what are you prepared to sacrifice? Yes, it's possible. Of course it is. But it ain't going to be easy, you know. If you want to have a comfortable lifestyle and a family, I think you're going to be struggling.
Yeah.
If you're going to dedicate your life to your art, you'll be fine. So, yeah, I guess it depends. I think it's possible, but you're going to have to make sacrifices, and you may not want to do that.
Is there any advice you'd have for any writers out there that are trying to get their script sold and produced?
Well, my biggest advice would be more on, you know, where do you see your life going? And again, you know, that thematic question. What are you prepared to do? What are you prepared to sacrifice? You need to know that. And otherwise you can be profoundly frustrated if you find out about the reality of the industry. So do your research. I think that's probably a good piece of advice. Do your research. Don't just sit at your desk trying to write that story, because once it's finished, it needs to go somewhere. So try to get a feel for how the industry works. And if you choose a life in the arts, you will have to organize your life around that.
Yeah.
It doesn't work the other way around. I don't think so.
Does a writer need an agent to sell a script these days, or is it something they can do on their own?
Well, you know, this is probably the biggest misunderstanding in our industry. Agents don't get you work. You know, you get yourself work.
Yeah.
The agent does the deal. You know, once there's a deal that needs to be negotiated, the agent will happily do that for you and take 15%. But the agent is not going to bring you work. That's not how it works.
Is getting Hollywood's attention something that's impossible now for an emerging Australian writer, or can it be done?
I have one good friend. He's Australian, lives in LA. He's tried to come back and live in Australia. He couldn't do it anymore, you know. So it's actually easier to survive there as a writer than it is here.
Because Australia being as small as it is.
Yeah, because there's a lot more work over there, and they pay so much better. Yeah. When we say Hollywood, obviously we just say, you know, it's America, it's LA. The Hollywood studios, that's a whole different ball game.
Looking back on your career, you've had three, probably close to 4 decades now of a career. Can you name a single proudest moment?
Last week, probably the best week in LA, doing with my mates of the story shop what I would want to do 52 weeks of the year. Yeah, I did it for 1 week. We celebrated the US release of Danger Close, which means that now apparently I can become a member of the WGA, the Writers Guild of America. There you go. We went to the American film market pitching our new projects, and we worked very hard every day on our new projects. So getting up early and just do the work, and then have a few meetings and celebrate at night. That was fantastic, and I was very proud that we made it to that point. That is awesome. So what is next for you? We'll see. I'm not the type of guy who reads the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People and then sets out a plan for the next year, the next 5 years, the next 10 years. I'm much more open for whatever opportunity comes to me. And that's worked really well. It takes less energy. You know, you just every day I choose what are the options and what shall I do. So what's next? I don't know. I mean, I hear that we're going to do the pod in New Zealand next year. So we're going to do a full Accelerator Pod in New Zealand. So I look forward to that. I'm also looking forward to having my mates of the story shop in Sydney a few times next year, so we can accelerate that work. And yeah. That's about it. I mean, I don't make big plans. Right. I hope they come to me. So if someone was wanting to get in touch with you or find out some more information about what you do, where can they get in touch with you? Well, just Google my name. You'll find one of the, I'm on Facebook. There's the story department. you'll find a way of contacting me. Just spell my name correctly and you'll find me. My name is Karel, Karel Segers, Segers.
And we'll find you just like that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming in and giving us the time.
Absolute
Really
pleasure.
appreciate
It was much cooler inside than outside.
Oh, tell me about it. And it's always a pleasure to see you, Karel. Thanks a lot,
Russell.
mate.
Pleasure.
Bye.
Once more, a big thanks to Karel for taking time out of his busy schedule to speak with Russell. If you want to sharpen your skills as a screenwriter or take your career to the next level, sign up for Karel's acclaimed Immersion Screenwriting course. There's no better way of mastering your craft than by doing, and that's what Immersion Screenwriting will do for you. There are multiple versions of the course, including the Big Boys Platinum version that runs for 6 months, or the standard version that runs for 50 days. You can take the standard version to learn writing for feature film or television for just $99 but as a special gift to listeners of Film Rhapsody, Karel is offering a 50% discount. Just enter the code podcast50 at the checkout and you can begin your writing journey today. You can find the course at http://screenwriting.courses, or for more information, email Karel at k@tsd.im. And that's all for this episode. Next week, Russell and I speak with producer Masood Vajahani, the visionary behind the Spacefaring Civilization project, and one of the producers on our award-winning short film, The Man in the Moon. I'm Dan Sanguinetti, and this is Film Rhapsody.
Film Rhapsody is produced by Dan Sanguinetti and Russell Lee for Sanguinetti Media. Head to sanguinettimedia.com.au to subscribe to all our episodes.
Oh, I didn't record it.